what the events are?
No, but I think it's all relative.
Yes.
For the group branches.
It's relative, but I think it would be helpful to know what are the relevant events that you use to benchmark these things. Because I think when someone from outside hears that's what you did, it's like, oh yeah, because I don't remember what happened 10 years ago. I can't say, in 2013 I did this. But if somebody reminds me of what was going on at that time, I can say, oh yeah, that's right, I remember. That's the year I did this. So it's a very human thing to do that, but this information is made very suspicious by other people. So I want us to collect that information. And then it's also interesting. It's interesting from people outside. What are the events that are important in your lives that you remember? So I would like to add that in as something, and you're right, it's not uniform, it's specific to each place. So what are the specific?
And then starting in 2012, of these animals, so camels, cattle, donkeys, goats, sheep, none, and they don't remember, which of the types of livestock did they own, right? So we want to know everything. So number of cattle, goats, and sheep, and maybe cows. And so we gather that number of the number of young animals in 2012, and the number of adult animals in 2012. And Jackson and I went back and forth on this a lot because there was a lot of questions. 2012, who remembers? And how sure are we about the accuracy of these numbers? And Jackson's feedback to me was, there's not a single Maasai that doesn't remember how many livestock they had every single year. Am I correct with this assumption?
Yes.
Yeah? And so that's why we pushed to have these livestock numbers all the way back to 2012. So the number of, and see this is camels. So how many young camels did they have? How many adult camels did they have? And for all of the livestock that I chose, I will be asked that question. How many young cattle did I have? How many adult cattle did I have? How many young goats did I have? How many adult goats did I have? How many young sheep did I have? How many adult sheep did I have? And so we collect data for each and every year starting 2012 to 2022, because these are the group ranches that started the project last year, and that's the only place where the surveys have been conducted. The group ranches that will start this year, they will go 2013 to 2023. Yeah? So we want to be able to get the livestock trend across all of those years. And then all of that data goes into the database, and then we create this report. So if you can see, historic livestock numbers haven't changed much. They were pretty low in 2013. It was a year throughout. But on average, the highest was about 39,000 sheep, and then the lowest was about 20,000 in 2013. And you can see how it fluctuates, but there's not a dramatic, like, here's something we need to be worried about, that we don't see the consistency in data. Obviously, the cattle numbers are also very consistent, and we're seeing cattle numbers go back up to what was in 2012. But again, this could be a great indication using previous NUBIs, using previous satellite imagery, to see if it correlates with what our data is telling us, right? And we can cut the data, presence or absence of camels, and how that changes over time. And so we're able to do that. You can see the livestock trend by group ranch. And so you can see there's massive fluctuations in some of the group ranches. But again, one of the things that I haven't done here is filter data sets that don't have all 10 years of the data, which I yet have to do.
So we did see this morning, but we saw it quickly. And we wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to understand that this is the information that's been collected for all of the group ranches over explained earlier today. That is what equals historic for a carbon project. That will be, this is identical to what we will have to do in Tanzania. Very same thing.
One of the things, remember I talked about samples? One of the things that we started doing at a later stage is started rejecting samples that didn't have all 10 years of data. So what people started doing, and especially the grazing coordinators, because they were trying to achieve targets, in the beginning they were doing the last couple of years and then saying that we don't remember. And so for consistency's sake, we started rejecting the data sets that didn't have all 10 years because that doesn't allow us to see the trends. And what we want is to be very, very confident that we have complete data sets from 2012 to 2022 where we can see the actual trended livestock numbers, right? If a household only provides us data for 2020, 2021, 2022, is that really fair and legitimate and statistically accurate to include it in the sample? It's not. Yeah?
About these numbers from outside of these projects, that no one can actually remember how many livestock they had 10 years ago, each year 10 years ago. And so they believe that this kind of information is just made up. It's not accurate. So I wonder if Francis and Justice and Siramoy, if you could just talk a little bit about that, about your experience gathering this data. Is it real? Do people actually remember the numbers, or are they just making them up?
Estimation, like if you ask someone to give you the numbers of livestock for the last 10 years, you have to know which year. Is it 2012? Then from there, you relate the year when there's something has happened. Maybe there's a lockdown or something like that. Then from there, you can actually figure out that by this year, I had the number of these animals. Then it goes up to date. So at some point, that's how we actually have them give us the numbers of animals.
I think that is very clear. The only thing people remember is
Get people to give you accurate information. But did you record for the years what the events are?
No, but I think it's all relative.
Yes.
For different branches.
It's relative, but I think it would be helpful to know what are the relevant events that you used to benchmark these things. Because I think when someone from outside hears that's what you did, it's like, oh yeah, because I don't remember what happened 10 years ago. I can't say, in 2013 I did this. But if somebody reminds me of what was going on at that time, I can say, oh yeah, that's right, I remember. That's the year I did this. So it's a very human thing to do that, but this information is made very suspicious by other people. So I want us to collect that information. And then it's also interesting. It's interesting from people outside. What are the events that are important in your lives that you remember? So I would like to add that in as something. And you're right, it's not uniform, it's specific to each place. So what are the specifics?
We were talking about the grazing plans. Part of what they were doing when they were doing the grazing plans was also speaking to the grazing committee about how many livestock in each village. Now I need to draw this out because it hasn't come out very clearly about what happens. And this was, again, when we were doing the grazing plans, this was a major source of confusion. When we first did the grazing plans, and this is taking you guys a step back, it's just to help you learn the lessons that we learned without making a mistake. When we first did the grazing plans, remember the grazing blocks? The grazing committees came back to us and told us 1,000 cattle, 2,000 sheep, 2,000 goats, right? And then over here, 500 cattle, 1,000 sheep, 1,000 goats. Now, that doesn't make sense to me. And it didn't make sense from a rational perspective because this is a zone. This is a village. This is village B. This is, let's say, village C. Right? And this is a grazing block. And the livestock belongs to this village. The livestock belongs to this village. The livestock belongs to this village. Does that number, without accounting for birth rates and death rates, change significantly in the year? Anyone? Underway? So the livestock number for village C, as they move from grazing blocks, is the same number of livestock, same number of cattle, and we got this one, got this one, got this one, got this one, right?
Yes.
Again, from this village, it's the same number of livestock that move to this block, this block, this block, this block, this block, right? Again, from village B, it's the same livestock that move from this one. So instead of asking for livestock numbers per grazing block, the grazing area, what we started asking is give us the livestock numbers for the villages themselves, because that gives us a more accurate number at the beginning of the year. Even if they just mix and mingle and do whatever they need to do, the livestock still belongs to these households in the village. So the best way to get the census and the annual livestock census is looking at the village numbers, not looking at the numbers of livestock in each grazing block. Is that clear? Yeah? And that's what we learned when we were doing this. The first process was very much, they gave us grazing blocks and they allocated numbers. But how they came to these numbers was unclear. And when we did this, and then they allocate the way that the livestock move, it makes a lot more sense.
The data in case of animals moving in, seeking for pasture. Now that we have carried out the exercise maybe the previous month, and now it happened that this month there are animals who have come in. What period of time are you going to adjust it? And
So this is
that number which have come in.
This is part of the annual grazing plan. In January, they developed this, so we can share the most current reports with you. By end of January, they have to have these annual grazing plans ready and give us livestock estimates for each village. Now, the influx of visiting livestock happens in a seasonal manner, and that's captured in the daily grazing report that the grazing coordinators do. And so we collect that data on a daily basis, so we're able to tell the total number of livestock based on what the grazing coordinators are reporting back on. So that doesn't go into the actual grazing plan. What happens is Jenny and Louis, who are in the Kajiado office, will look at these numbers and they'll say, oh, in Olulului, there are supposed to be X thousand cattle, and the data is actually showing a different number. How do we, why is the number different? And they'll actually ask that question to the grazing coordinators. So if you look at this, this is the report they get. And this is a report, let's say, on Wilson, in Karay grazing block, and we know that we're talking about Oladalu. There's 50 cattle, 50 goats, and 100 sheep. What they do is compare it to what was in the annual grazing plan of how many livestock should be in Karay. And if there's a massive difference, and they haven't seen any visiting livestock being reported in the daily grazing monitor, then they question why there's a big discrepancy. And so you'll see it in some of their notes where they'll have written what's not happening. So you see, this one says less livestock numbers, and then a lot of it is that the bunching is not being observed, and so that's just being moderated. So this is a capacity issue and a reporting issue, it might not actually be a numbers issue.
I think with that, only when you are feeding the animal, giving the, but collectively, how will you quantify the quantity of grass in a certain area, unless you planted those grass? So you know the amount.
Looking at the river that is Kenya, if I'm in Tanzania and Kenya's the river, I'm wondering what are they doing? And if I'm in Kenya and I'm looking at Tanzania, I'm wondering what are they going to do? I would like to start with anybody on the Tanzania side, and it's too bad that Richard's not here, but will be back soon. I would like to open it up first to Kuya and Lakoko. You have heard a bunch of things about what Kenya is doing. So now is a chance for you to ask questions of them. If I say that we are going to, we're going to have to put in, for example, so this is your opportunity to ask them any question you have. So I'm going to open it up. And I didn't warn you about this, so I realize you may need some time to think about it. And if you need some time to think about it, I can ask a few questions to help, because I can be on either bank. Because guess what? I put in the river. So, Kuya or Lakoko, do you have anything you want to ask right away?
Yes, maybe I want to ask about the collection of historic data.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that we are going to have the grazing coordinators in place, and I think they need to visit all the households, collect this data, if I got it right. So, you find there are a lot of households, so I think it will take a lot of time. So I don't know how that is going to be happening.
Great. I'm going to say that I would like Justice to take a stab at answering that. How did you gather all of those household survey, all that household survey data on livestock? How did you actually do it?
You see, first, as we go to training, those are grazing coordinators.
Okay, so you don't have to explain it to me.
Yes,
I want you to explain it to Kuya so he can hear you.
yes. Okay, first you have to get training as a grazing coordinator supervisor. Then from there, you call upon grazing coordinators, you train them on the same. Then from there, you hire some locals within the locality. You train also them, then from there, you go and gather the data, how you collect the data. So that's how it goes.
Then gather data. Who are the locals? No one has talked about locals yet. Where did they come in?
Okay, actually, locals, what I mean here, it depends, like, data, you have also to hire some educated people. So you consider those people who are above from 4 or diploma. So
Oh, I see what you mean. You were saying, I had misinterpreted what he said. I thought you said first you hire grazing coordinators, then
no.
you hire locals.
Training.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
My mistake. So I'm asking you to answer something. Did you understand that?
Yes.
Oh, it was just me that got confused. Just me. Okay, Tim. Brother! Bang! I'm out. I lost.
No, he said
they came up with a list of people who can hire as enumerators to collect the data that we want from the households. And after that, targeting those enumerators, we train them on what data we require them to collect in the field, in the households, how are they going to go about it, and in the training you have to give them the information about the project, what's happening, so that when they do collect this data, it kind of also help in awareness, so that they spread the word about the project, as it will happen, as it benefiting the community, and also that will give them at least some kind of soft landing in collecting this data, because the community already understand that this project, and now these enumerators are collecting data to help us still improve the project. So that is how we also.
So we maybe doing this a little bit.
Livestock, something like that, and also their movement of livestock from that specific village to another place. Where did you take your livestock? Where do you usually take them? Inside, like for example, inside Kajiado or outside Kajiado. So those are some of the information. There are many, and those are the few that I can remember without looking at the question.
So I'm going to ask a question so that I'm able to go in and do the surveys. In those surveys that were done in the households, were the grazing coordinators with them or not? No. Okay. Was anyone from Converge Analytics? We have to do these household surveys because we train local people who are known but trusted to gather this data. Very important part of this process. Another thing is how many surveys. It was a lot of surveys, which again, Converge told us what this was because it was based on general population data and a 95% confidence interval that says if you're going to estimate how many livestock there are, you have to survey this many households. So Rococo's question of please give me a formula for how many grazing coordinators we need, and I said, well, you know, it's a problem. Actually, for how many surveys we need, we come up with a formula that tells us that. So the number of surveys you will need to do will be defined for you. The key issue here is that, remember, data, but look who's gathering data. Do we have any idea how many local people we hired?
It ranged from between 12 to 18.
Total, how many local people do you think? 100 and something local people were hired over the project area to gather this data. Right away, yes, we have to gather a lot of data, but is that a benefit to local communities? It's absolutely a benefit. And we have to remind them that it's not full-time employment, but it's temporary employment that we are bringing and we're paying for, right? We have to make sure that people understand that this business we're going in together, we're hiring people to help us do this business. That's part of the reason that we're going into business together with them. All right? So I'm glad you asked that question, Kuya, because we didn't describe it this way. This is the how to do it. And that's what this session is about. How do we actually do these things? What would you have to do next? So a key question then becomes, how does Soils for the Future Tanzania engage with Converge? And that's an easy thing to solve. Start, because I think this is where his question was going to be. I would like you to explain how this happens on this map. And if you run into a problem, you're a bit confused, you can ask for support. You can phone a friend, right? But the true test of understanding is, can you explain it? So we heard yesterday about these two maps. We heard it, we sort of all nodded our heads and said, yes, we Great. And we've seen that some of our top challenges are how to divide the blocks, how to come up with a plan, right? Top challenges. So how are we going to get past that? Well, one of them is understanding. So now we want to see how well they can explain these two maps using these concepts. And you guys can help them, okay? The question is to the audience, do you understand the explanation? So if you don't understand the explanation, you get to ask questions, and Lakoko or Kuya is going to answer with the support of their support team, okay? So Lakoko, maybe you can try to begin to explain what is...
Right. Now the problem is fine.
So before this is really tough. The only way we get through this is to ask any question, give any answer. We have to figure this out together. But this is a no judgment zone. We got to figure out how to do that. Even though I think these guys, like the judgers, they're not really judging. But if they don't understand, you guys, it's up to you to say that you don't understand. So please go ahead.
All right, thank you. We are going to develop our grazing plan, and this is our map. And actually, we need to develop something like this, which actually showing the partitions or the blocks or subblocks in our map. So this is just an example that we need within our map. We need to have some parts or divide like this, develop some blocks which we will be actually raising our livestock rotation. So assume this is our grazing area. So we need to divide these parts to have 4 parts, as you can see from this roughly drawing. So depending on the season, that's the livestock graze over this area in a particular season. Let's say Alamein. So if it is a drought season, and then all livestock graze around, in this area. So culturally, they graze all around. Just to go, livestock just scattered all around. So what I'm going to develop, bring to you, is to have some partition within the same area in which the cattle will be, or the livestock will be grazing, but not all around as it can be. So, we have some point around. We have Eriki, we have Orubai, so we have Angarekiti. So let us assume these are some blocks, some small blocks. Because I say this is the big block, so we need to have some small parts or some blocks. So this we can say for the month of August, the first 2 weeks of August, the livestock will be grazing around, in the so the livestock will be grazing at the Griambe for the 2 weeks, on the first 2 weeks of August. And then, over those 14 days, then we can shift it to another block. So I can just summarize that we have the first block, we can turn this at the second block, we can turn this at the third block, and then we can
set around here, that's the fourth block. Then we'll be matching exactly with our roughly drawing. Thank you. I understand. So I studied the wet season first, LMAU, which I show that within this LMAU grazing block, then we develop the four sub-blocks. Then we feed with those markers. So what? So actually this is one. Now moving to the another season, we could move to the other side of the grazing land according to this arrangement. Okay.
No, this is a real question. So, in my mind, the grazing plan shows me the grazing blocks. Can you show me the grazing blocks?
Zone. Represent the zone.
We like the application.
So at least the whole was trying to emphasize one thing. If we have one block, usually we can use this.
So the red is you have the zone,
Yeah.
and the zone have villages, and the villages have grazing blocks. So the red one is the zone, and then now inside the zone there are villages inside it. Then inside the zone and the villages have the grazing, several grazing blocks.
So I have a question. Is every grazing zone, does it include both wet season and dry season?
Yes.
Okay. So then you have a zone with blocks.
For example, in Chompoli is a grazing block. So you go to the grazing plan and read where does it fall? Does it fall under Kisira? Does it fall under Dalo? So that's when you will get to know that Chompoli is used during it.
But if each one of the blue areas on that map that has a name is a grazing block, am I right so far?
Yeah.
Then each of those grazing blocks is either a wet season block or a dry season block.
Yes.
So you could label it that way. So it would be easy to see this is a wet season block and that is a dry season block. And where's Steiner? Where's Steiner, right? It's just how to visualize this easier so that we can see that your eye wants to be able to go and say, okay, here's the zone, however it's shaped. Inside the zone are blocks. Those blocks are wet season and dry season, and people are moving between the blocks and the seasons. So that's easy, but when I look at this map, I can't tell the difference between wet season and dry season. I can't tell the difference. Some of them look like they're across zones, but in my mind, they should be contained in units and easy to see.
So this is what these maps were developed to very much. Grazing committees have done a lot of the drawing themselves about where the boundaries are.
Okay.
We have the details about which block is which season,
Okay.
etc., etc. But we did not have these boundaries in a shape file to be able to put it on a map to then send back to the grazing committee.
Understood.
So from a how to develop a grazing plan perspective, we also wanted very much encourage the grazing committees to draw themselves how they perceived it and to be able to see it by movement. Now, this wasn't developed by one grazing committee. This was developed by three grazing committees. And so each grazing committee used the same map to draw their zones and the
Great.
cross-zone movement.
So so that's very important for both Kuya and Makoko, right? That's the process of getting there. What I was saying is that for me to understand the map, I need to see those differences because I'm looking for those differences because I'm thinking like that. So what we need to do is just very simply take each of the grazing blocks and maybe put another color on them and it's green circle or an X for the wet season and a brown for the dry, it's just something, anything that helps me interpret it. But I personally, I know that there's a massive amount of work that gets in here, but one of the reasons I was putting Kuya Manoka on the spot is because I can't explain this. Because I get confused. And we've got to get to a place where the maps work at the local level. So you don't want me drawing the boundaries. You want the grazing committees drawing the boundaries. That's the right process. But we've got to get it to a place where we can explain that easily. And we're very close, but we're not quite there. Does that make sense? Really, this would be, in my mind, to make me feel better, we could easily just put green and red or whatever, or something to let my eye see the difference between wet season and dry season. And I think if I saw that, I would understand it better. Yes, go ahead.
I think even when the communities, those basic communities, take the green color, draw the wet season, and then they can share the green. And then the dry season areas, they can also share and give you all the areas depending on the season they can do. This is also important to that. And then maybe you can now translate it in the GIS kind of.
Yep.
So I think here.
This is an example, I'm just going to say, this is an example of what we call, we have an expression that says, hindsight is 20/20. Right? It's very easy for me to look at this and say, well, if I was doing it, it would look this way. Going forward, this is what we're all going to need to do. This has gotten us incredibly far. And as we learned, it's been really hard to do. And perhaps the most important thing we can learn in this workshop is how to all have the same vision of what we're trying to get and help each other get there as quickly as possible. But I would say this is the most difficult thing that Soils for the Future Africa has had to do over the last year, is get to here. It's not easy. So yes, I'm sorry. Wilson,
Yeah, what I'm thinking here, or what I'm assuming, is that the map is permanent. The villages may be permanent. And I understand even from West Dynamic, there was also a place for the temporary villages. So the reason is why maybe it is not easy to indicate in the map the actual season is because they are season.
Yes.
Right? So they are not permanent. So you cannot say that this will be always green. This will always be drought. So, and I think that's why you have the daily monitoring. So, and over time, the grazing community, committees and the grazing coordinators and supervisors will agree on the plan according to the season. So I think that's why it will be confusing if you indicate that area as usually green. No, it's not easy. And especially even with Shobole, because I've been there. There are times one area will be wet for months, or even half a year. But there are times it will be dry for 2 years. So you see, the green area will be dry for 2 years.
Right.
But it can be green for 6 months in other times. So I think it gives us a way forward to plan. In any time the season of God allows us.
I think maybe some advice from Steiner. We want to be able to digitize this and have shapefiles. Right? What's the best way we can do this that you get the most accurate geo-referenced data that you can then scan this, digitize it, and get a shapefile of the grazing blocks? And then when we want to develop the 4 seasons of Oladalu, Kokwa, Olaleyu, and Kisirat, it's easy for us to have a digital version for communication and for demonstration that these are the seasons as indicated by the version. Is it easy to scan this and to be able to get it?
It's not easy, but it's doable.
But how do we make it easy so it's a seamless process of doing it?
Yeah, so the first thing, The only hard season to plan is short rains because they are not uniformly distributed in the landscape. So sometimes people move where the rain falls. So it's very hard to plan that. But for the other season like the Ngagwa and Malami, that one is, you can plan that on the map. And how we can do it, we have these grazing coordinators and they do take coordinates of where the livestock are on what day, on what month. So based on those, we can have those coordinates and make a map based on that. And again, there are names of the places, the villages. We can georeference the name, because once we have a place name, then it's easier to georeference that place.
Yes, and so this was going to be my point. Each of these maps, the base map, is actually an actual map. So this was not a blank piece of paper that the communities drew on. You see up here? This is what the distance is. This is the international boundary, right? This was a printed out map. So on maps like this, we can get specific georeferenced points. And then we can also get a few other GPS points. Just working with Steiner and others, being able to move from this map that's drawn by the community to a digital map is going to be really important for us. And it's also going to be important not just now, but this is all going to change in 10 years. Climate's going to change, right? The rainfall patterns are going to change. And just as Wilson just described, the seasons are driving the movement of the livestock more, and as the rain changes, we expect these grazing blocks are going to change too with the seasons. So we have to recognize it's not the way my mind works, which is 4 square blocks that go here with the right color. It's got to be more flexible than that. So it's a challenge for us to do this, and we have to recognize it's a tough challenge, but it is our challenge, and we got to figure it out. So
Yeah, and then lastly, on your question, I think we might get access to the administrative boundary maps, and that will have to the lowest level, that is the sub-location. And then the villages are drawn from the sub-location, and even some names we can get from there. And these grazing blocks, they are zoned based on locations. So from there we can still make a map of those areas.
I'm pretty sure that we've done that, where we scan this using a scanner and have a raster copy of this, a raster. Then you use the same thing in the GPS or a few other known points, right? And once you do that, you overlay that, and then you have to digitize it. Yeah, and once you reference the image, then you can reference the blocks that have been drawn the way they
So
are.
again, the challenge is referencing these images. These drawings might not be that accurate.
Which is okay for us.
Okay.
So for us, it's about getting a rough draft to start with as we refine the process.
And then again, referencing these
They're different. Why is this so difficult in Kenya? Well, one of the reasons is the group branch boundaries and all of those things are essentially all verbal, right? People understand, but there's no, the group branches do have boundaries. Are they all, who am I going to ask this question to? Jackson, are all of the group branch boundaries